Everybody. Welcome to the fourth Norway Now 2021 in collaboration with North American partners. My name is Christina Friis. I'm the Deputy Director of Performing Arts Hub Norway. I'm so happy to see that so many people have logged on to spend time with us this Tuesday. In this panel discussion, moderated by Lindsey Maliekel from the New Victory Theatre, Boomer Stacey from IPAY, and Dayna Martinez from the Ordway Center, you will meet Norwegian and North American artists, Rimfrost and Nambi E Kelley, Panta Rei Danseteater and Blindspot Collective, and Strømgren Kompani and Santee Smith. In these pandemic, strange and dramatically demanding times for the performing arts sector, I'm glad and moved that we are able to keep up the Norway Now dialogue this year digitally. We meet here and now. We will talk and reflect together, keeping up the good and important networking. And yes, the COVID-19 situation affects us all. But for me and my good colleagues in Performing Arts of Norway, the main perspective is to continue and never give up our mandate given by the artists and the Norwegian government to facilitate international dialogue and exchange within the performing arts. I would like to thank Lisa Reynolds and Geir Lindahl, who have produced these events and who will be running the show backstage today. So we invite you to use the chat during the webinar to communicate and share resources. And Lisa will be posting links to our program with information about this year's Norwegian delegation and links to the works of the artists in this seminar. I want to express my thanks to the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Norwegian Consulate in New York for backing and support. So, as artists who make work for young people, as presenters, let's dream and discuss together. Lindsey, I give the word to you.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. My name is Lindsey, and I'm the Vice President of Education and Engagement at the New Victory Theater. And together with Boomer and Dayna, we are so thrilled to be helping and lead this conversation today. Before I give you a little bit more context about how the goals of today, I'd actually like to pause to do a land acknowledgement. I want to take a moment to honor the lands that I grew up on, which are the lands protected by the Snohomish and Salish people on the west coast of the United States, and the lands I currently work and live on, which are the lands of the Lenni Lenape people. These lands stretch from New York to Pennsylvania. And since we are here from all over the world, I actually invite you to use the chat to place the lands that you are currently on into the chat. And if you need a resource to look up what native lands you might be on, I've just placed that in the chat too. That's my favorite resource. I want to take the time to respect and acknowledge the brutal histories of stolen lands and forced removals that are here in America. And I seek to acknowledge Indigenous peoples from past, present, and futures, and join them in honoring and celebrating these lands. And I invite all of us to take a moment to think about one thing we might be able to learn or do to honor the Indigenous lands of the places that we are. As we move forward, and please, if you can, place in the native lands you are on in the chat. The goal of today is different than what we normally think of when we love to welcome and gather in New York in January, where we learn about the shows that Norwegian artists are making and we meet each other. The goal of today is to spend some time actually building relationships and to share both the work that we are currently doing, but also do a little bit of collective dreaming about the world that we'd like to create as we move forward out of these times. And so to do that, we're gonna create the day, the framework of the day, slightly differently than a traditional panel discussion. But what we'd like to invite you to do, everyone here, both the Norwegian artists and the North American artists, the presenters, those who are just TYA lovers, is to participate both as who we are now but to allow yourself to also move into the space of who we would like to be collectively moving forward, and that we'd like to hold both of those spaces in these conversations. I'd like to invite Dayna Martinez to tell us a little bit more about how the day will actually unfold. Dayna, will you fill us in?
Sure will. Thank you, Lindsey. Hello, everyone. I'm Dayna Martinez. I'm the Senior Programming Director at the Ordway Center for the Performing Arts in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I'm coming to you from my home in Minneapolis. And those are, of course, are the ancestral homes of the Dakota and Ojibwe people. And yeah, I'll walk us through the framework for our time together today. Next, we will have, after me, we'll have Boomer Stacey, and he will lead the artist duos in short introductions of each other. And after that, we will all go to 3 separate breakout rooms. Actually, one breakout room will be this one that we're in now, and then we'll have 2 others. And those will be with each of the artist pairs and moderators. I'm one of the moderators. You'll get to choose which breakout room you want to attend, or you can be assigned as well. And that'll be the artists that you want to learn more about. The breakout rooms will last 40 minutes. We do have some questions that we have prepared, but we also invite you to post your questions and comments in the chat, and the moderators will be watching the questions and get those answered. And then finally, we will come back together to wrap things up and have a short reflection on what we took away from the breakout rooms. And now I'd like to pass it over to Boomer Stacey to do the introductions.
Thank you, Dayna. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. My name's Boomer. I'm the Executive Director of IPAY, as well as the Executive Director of PACT. I'm a mixed blood settler, and I currently live and work on the traditional unceded stolen lands of the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Algonquin peoples. I'll just tell you a little bit about how we chose to do our introductions. When we were putting this together, for us, it was really important that this wasn't going to be a traditional pitch. We didn't want this to be a transactional conversation and to be selling a performance. Even though that might come from this, we really wanted this to be about relationship building. And one of the things that we think is a benefit and an opportunity of COVID is this is a great time for us to be building relationships. And really part of what we believe is that from those relationships comes the opportunities to share work, to work together, to create new works, and potentially to tour work. And so when we found out who our Norwegian artists were, we went about pairing them with artists that we knew from North America that we thought might form a nice duo. And in thinking about how we wanted to introduce those artists to you, we thought it might be nice as a first step in this relationship building for them to introduce each other to you. So instead of someone standing there saying, hey, here's who I am, and reading their biography, we wanted them to have a sense to get to know each other and then to share back to you who their new friends were. So I would I'd be very happy right now to introduce Santee and Yo to you and give them space to introduce each other to you.
Who goes first?
Yeah, Yo and Santee.
I was just wondering who goes first?
You can go, Yo. Do you want to introduce Santee?
Yeah, you can go first.
You can go,
right.
if that's okay, Santee. Yes, Santee Smith, we've been talking a bit now online and become good friends, and she doesn't know it yet, but I plan to, within the next couple of years, to make a visit. She is from, she's Canadian / Mohawk, and her name, real name, I will leave that pronunciation to herself because it's rather difficult, but she lives and works in the 6 Nations of the Grand River territory. And she's a multidisciplinary artist with a focus on embodied storytelling. That's something we share, actually. And she comes from a long line of ancestral artists and innovators. If you look closely on the screen, you see her house is packed with art that she and her family has been making. So that's quite impressive. She founded a company, her own company, Gahawi Dance Theater, for 15 years, and has been producing work and touring internationally and nationally with that. She's told me also that little fun fact, she takes her responsibility as a representative for what she represents quite seriously. It's serious business, but she's actually quite a clown, she claims. She is funny, very funny, not superficial, but very funny. Thanks.
Nyawe. So I had the opportunity to meet Yo, and yes, you're welcome to Six Nations. I already extended that invitation and come and visit. Yo is from Norway and grew up in a small town which is called Trondheim. Is that how you say it? Yeah. And he is also a choreographer, theater director, and he has his own company. He's been working with in his namesake company, Strømgren Kompani. He also works as a freelance choreographer and director, and has performances internationally. And it's one of his specialities is to go and work and collaborate with others. He is also a playwright, and we share something, which is we come from a ballet background, and he's also working in ballet and similarly embodied storytelling, theatrical works, and as well creates not only for young audiences, but just a creative person who creates work for all different types of audiences and communities in collaborations. So fun fact about him is his humor is his trademark, but the truth is he's always trying to be serious. So we're kind of like the reverse. We're the same in many ways, but the reverse in others. So it was great to have conversations with him and also talk about our connection to living in the land and not being so much urban per se. So I'll leave it at that. Nyawagoa, thank you for having me. Oh, and just my name is Dagalunyakwa, which means picking up the sky. And I'm Gayengahaga. From one of the Haudenosaunee nations.
Thank you to you both. That was beautiful. I didn't know that either one of you was funny, and so I've learned something already. So thank you for that. I'll look forward to hearing some funny things from you later. Next, I'm very happy to introduce Nambi and Christine. Christine, would you like to go first?
Yes, I'd love to do that. Yeah, my name is Christine, and I'm presenting Nambi E Kelley, which I was lucky enough to get to know 1 week ago. When we spoke, Lindsey encouraged us to pay attention to the differences and the similarities. So therefore, I will take the presentation quite literally through this. So some of our differences. We grew up in very different places with different kind of frames for our upgrowing. Kelley grew up in Chicago with approximately 2.7 million inhabitants. I grew up in Sørreisa in the countryside of Norway with 3,452 inhabitants. She grew up by the projects, and I grew up between mountains. She is nominated to and have won a lot of prizes. She has worked both in the US and internationally. She's worked a lot in TV and film. She grew up thinking that she couldn't make an impact. And she wrote from a very young age, only 6-7 years old, when she started to express herself through text. And she's always written to create a context to her experiences. So some of the similarities, we are obviously both engaged in theater for a young audience. We both see theater and art as activism. We both start projects and act in them. So we're both actors. Her parents are divorced, and our mothers raised us. We both loved to make plays when we were kids. And we're both blessed in life with people who makes us laugh, and that means a lot to the both of us. She's touring as we speak, digitally, and I'm touring physically. She's been, we both have been really busy during the pandemic time, and we're both full of new text and new projects. So yeah, to kind of sum up, she says that how she describes her work changes every day. And the day we spoke, she talked about her work being a sacred task, about sacrificing, and and it's a soul work. And she always tries to crack the code of the art of living. And I would really, really love to read her work one day. Thank you.
Oh, wow. So beautiful. Thank you. So lovely. I wrote you a little something. So what you won't see on Christine Mira Thunheim's resume is that she's always loved being on stage. From a young age, she was playing with dolls and making stories and dressing up. Her favorite toy was a box with different dresses where she could take on different characters and make up plays. A child of divorce, as am I, and from a family with meager means, as am I, Christine had a bug, and that bug was to do theater. It wasn't common, but her mother made it happen when she was a teen. As a performer, she discovered a love of movement with very little text. When she finished school, she and a bunch of her friends at her acting school then created a company. This company liberated Christine to make work that was her own, and that she could make art where art was needed, where art did not currently exist, in the mountains. She and her cohorts did not have money, but they had a lot of heart. She says she made a lot of bad theater, but she also made work she really cares about, and hence Rimfrost was born, and a love of creating theater for young audiences. She considers herself a producing actor. She likes to work and rework work, even while it's in performance, allowing the young audience's impact on the work to truly become one with the work. Being in conversation with her audiences is most important. She is clear she doesn't know how to make work without the audience being an integral part of her process. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Those are both very very beautiful, and I love hearing that you're both making work in the time of pandemic. It's nice to hear that you're out in the world and sharing what you do with young people. So thank you for that. Finally, I'm very happy to introduce Anne and Catherine. Catherine, do you want to start?
Sure. I kind of wish I could redo it now. I'm like, I want to introduce her in a beautiful, poetic way. But I have so enjoyed getting to know Anne these last couple of weeks. It has been surprising even, especially through her work. So Anne Akinus is the executive director of Panta Rei, based in Norway. She started her own company 20 years ago, and her theater company it's a dance theater company that produces work for intergenerational audiences, and says children from 10 to 100. And they tour within Europe and they tour outside of Europe. They do large-scale dance theater productions and community performances like free public promenade shows, festivals. Anne doesn't know this, but we share a love for flash mobs also. I'm one to do some public dancing and invite audiences to do that like Anne. I have really enjoyed over these last couple weeks hearing Anne talk about the work that they're doing, as she puts it, outside of the parameters of the stage. I also find it really exciting that it sounds like many of the artists here are talking about art and activism and community engagement and embodying our stories. But Anne and I share that passion as well for investing in community, getting them involved at various stages of the creative process. Part of their process, even through Panta Rei, is even before the creative process. They are meeting with the community and finding out how to create work that's really relevant to them and bringing them in throughout the process, including and especially as part of the performance day. I've also really appreciated that in their outreach work as well as the way that they train young people. Their methodology is based in making dance accessible to all who want to participate. I have found that the dance theater work is more meaningful to Anne and to her company when they can expand out and really bring more people in. Even people, or maybe even especially people, as I understand, who don't see themselves as dancers, and just really inviting them into the gift and the liberation of movement and dance in whatever stage that they're in. So that's a little bit about Anne.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That's really lovely. Yes, I wish I also had a bit of a longer manuscript now. But it's been so lovely to talk to you twice since we met the first time. And I have to say that I was a little bit envious the last time we were talking, because it sounded as if you were in the middle of the rainforest and I was in 15 minus. So but it was really nice talking to you. But I've written down something. This is Catherine Hannah Schrock, and she's the co-founder and co-director of Blindspot Collective, a theater company situated in San Diego and established in 2017. When working on the introduction for Hannah and Blindspot Collective, I was looking for what I think makes them unique, and it did not take long before I noted the following. They are daring. That's maybe the first thing I noticed. Always looking for new ways to catch the interest of a wider audience, often aiming to target those that not necessarily would come to the theatre on their own accord. And I really do admire this. It's great. It's fantastic work and very, very important work. Blindspot Collective is very much invested in allowing young voices to be heard. Although you also work cross-generational, you are very occupied with young voices. This is visible through your use of forum and verbatim theatre and your interactive performances, which I've really enjoyed watching over the last few days. It is also much about inclusiveness and generosity and the absolute commitment to create holistic communities through theatre where all voices are equally worthy. And this I thank you for. I would love to be part of it. And you promised to involve me in a digital performance. So I'm really looking forward to this. It's been very inspiring to investigate Blindspot Collective, and I do really look forward to our conversation later on today, because we could not stop talking when we first started. So this will be fantastic. And I find that we do have equal interest in quite a lot of the work that we do, and especially in finding those people and voices that has yet to be discovered and listened to, both touring locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. And it's been really, really nice discussing with you. So thank you.
Thank you so much to you both. So nice to hear that collaboration and exchange is already underway. Christina and Geir, you can check that off the list. We've accomplished it. I know I'll be moderating Anne and Catherine in one of the breakout rooms, but for everybody else, I don't know how you're going to select one of these three duos. I would like to be part of all three. Geir, are you managing the breakout part?
Yes, sir. No, so nice to just listen to you. I could just continue listening. You know, also so happy to see so many people logged on. So that's also thank you. No, yeah, I can assign the breakout rooms after your wishes. So I mean, if you, Boomer, said you wanted to have to go to one, I'm happy to assign you.
So yeah, so I'm with Anna and Catherine. Lindsey is with Nambi and Christine, and Dayna is with Santee and Yo. So those are our three options. We'll all be running through the same basic set of questions with our artists. I believe they're all being recorded. Is that correct, Pierre? And so no matter what you choose, you'll be able to go and listen in or watch the other sessions afterwards. And people, they won't be randomly assigned. They can select. Is that true? Or am I making
let's try that. Yeah. Okay. I'll just run you through. I'll start assigning you Boomer with your friends, and you said Boomer and
Anne and Catherine.
And Catherine. And I'll send you there, and then I'll ask who will like to join you.
So as Geir makes the tech magic happen, it's probably good for you to know that as you make decisions about which conversation you want to join, that we will be sort of talking around the same ideas of our current work and then the future. But I also encourage you to follow the conversation that most excited you about where that intersects with the things that you are interested in now, especially because we all will be able to see the recordings of all 3 breakout rooms if you would like to go back at some other time. Geir, do you have more instructions for us?
Oh, who would like to join Anne, Boomer, and Catherine? If you just post in the chat, I'll figure out who wants to join. Or you can also use your voice. I'm also good with that. And I think Boomer, he asked if Medora, if you can join them.
That's fair as well. I see that Bert in the chat has sort of said, put me where you will.
Yeah,
so that's a fair response as well if you're if you're feeling like you'd just like a random assignment.
My wife's reaction usually too.
They wouldn't let me go. But who are the other artists that would like to have a room as well?
So the next room is Lindsey, Nambi, and Christine.
We'll keep you in this room, and then we'll put
Dayna and Yo and Santee.
Yeah. Why wouldn't it give me that option? The names. Santee and who was the last one?
Yo.
Yo, he went there actually.
And Dayna. And Dayna.
Dayna, thank you. Yo. And then I'll just assign some of you.
Still feels a bit like magic that we can be literally all across the globe and be click and assigned to different places. You'd think a year in I'd be very used to it by now, but
Yeah, still feels weird.
Gary, do you mind if I start conversation, and then if people continue to want to choose places, they can do so through the chat?
Yeah, do that. This is fine. Thank you.
Fabulous. And just jump in anytime you
Yeah.
need us to pause. Oh, I'm so happy to be here. So the goal of today's breakout group conversation is to delve a little bit further into some of the work that Christine and Nambi are doing currently and some of the work that they are hoping to do in the future. But also to broaden that conversation to include all of us who are here, and to really sort of honor one of my favorite, most freeing pieces of advice ever was a conference I was at years ago where they said, you know, the people who end up in this room and in this conversation are the right people, and the conversation we end up having is the right conversation. And no one needs to be worried that if this conversation goes somewhere we didn't expect, that it meant that we went off track. And instead, what we did is we found our track. So what I would like to invite is that anyone who is here as part of this conversation uses the chat function to either comment, exclaim, or to ask specific questions or follow-up questions. And what I'll be trying to do is I'll be watching this chat and then pitching to whoever is sort of asking or exclaiming to verbally join in the conversation as well. So that's how the mechanics of this will work. I've got a few starter questions, but before we get there, I actually would love to just make sure to invite Christine and Nambi that if there was anything that you wanted to add in to round out or flesh out who you are as artists that wasn't mentioned in the large group, that this is a great time to put a little bit more context onto who you are as artists and what it is you're working on. Nambi or Christine, did either of you have something you wanted to add in?
Thank you. I think it was beautiful what Nambi said, and so I don't know what to add. Really.
You don't need to add anything. Nambi, is there anything you wanted to add in? Great.
And probably something will come during the conversation. Yeah.
Yes, please. So one of the things that we wanted to sort of bring into this conversation in this sort of bizarre time that we're all living in, and especially some of the real points of tension and similarities between how North American artists are working right now and how Norwegian artists are working right now, is we wanted to ask explicitly, as Nambi and Christine, as you are working on shows for young audiences during this time, how have you thought about successful TYA works? Like, what is your own personal artistic view of what a successful piece of theater looks like for young audiences? And has that changed or adjusted in this time as to what it, where you were, well, how you thought about it a year ago?
Yeah, it has changed a bit. What I think is the important thing is that it's relevant and that it's entertaining. That doesn't mean it has to be fun, but it's like this spark that keeps you want to be a part of it. It can also be it can be slow. It doesn't have to be like, but it has to be a part of. It has to kind of catch you, kind of, yeah. And also the last part is maybe it's what is not there already, what is not spoken of, what is not brought to the table, and what does other, maybe I don't mean it to like kind of look down on, but what does parents and teachers and find difficult to talk about? What do we adults think it's difficult to talk about, and how can we break this kind of up? Because I think that a lot of things that we don't want to talk to children or young audience with or about is that the fear is from us, from the adult. So we just have to kind of crack it up and this has changed because I think that the experience that young audience have now with this pandemic situation is an experience that I don't have. So we have a situation where because I don't think it's the same to be an adult and a child in this situation. So they have an experience. Of course, we all have experience that that are individual, but this is a kind of big experience that I don't have the same bodily experience. I have it as an adult, and that's something different. So this is one different, and the other is that kind of the other things that I already work with. I think it's more kind of even more important. It's even more important that it's relevant. It's even more important that we use the time that I get to spend with young people, that I really use that well. I think it's even more important. Yeah, so that's some of my thoughts just now.
We'll come back to a couple of those. You gave us quite a few rich places, but Nambi, I'd love to hear about how you're thinking about it right now as well.
Sure. Just to piggyback on Christine's observation, I feel similarly that that you have to deal with what is now. Like, you can't wait another year or to next year. And I felt like that prior to the pandemic, but I think as a creator, I was afraid to actually go there. And it's almost like this pandemia space has created space for me to really sort of be fearless in how I write work for young audiences. And I think that, because we're all still in a digital space here in the States, that the blessing for us was, it costs a lot of money to tour, but, pandemic hit, like everybody, all our money disappeared in the blink of an eye. But what's been really fun was pivoting to this digital space and creating a digital work for young audiences to engage in, and actually giving us the opportunity to work with artists in other cities, in other countries. So, because that just wouldn't happen. It would cost too much, right? So I can't fly Christine in, to be in my play. But we just produced a digital project where the director's in New York, I'm in New York as the playwright, the editor was in North Carolina, one of the actors was in Georgia, the other actor was in Iowa, the other actor was in Chicago. Like, just being able to work, and the musical director was in California. So like, that wouldn't have happened prior. It just wouldn't have happened. And so this pandemic space has also sort of exploded my mind about the possibilities of who our collaborators could be. And so I was absolutely not thinking that direction prior to a year ago. I absolutely was thinking, oh my God, well, who's in town? Right? Because those were the parameters of what we could build. And so, but the space of tackling work in a very fearless way, there's a piece that was commissioned out of Chicago Children's Theater called Diamond's Dream. And it's a puppet show that's done digitally, and it's very, very beautiful. But the thing that really grabbed me about it, in alignment with what Christine has put forth as conversation, is that one of the scenes in the very beginning of the play is a young Black boy in Chicago on the South Side wearing a mask, and he's going to his grandmother's house, because the grandmother is dying of COVID. And so because that's the reality that we're all dealing with now. And how dare we not create space for young people to bring their fears to the art and create space for them to feel it and to create a pathway for, not to fix it, but to allow space, just to hold space. It's a very powerful moment, I think, in that regard.
So in a second, I'm going to ask Nambi and Christine to sort of follow up with some specifics, but everybody who's here, the conversation brought up the word fearless. And also this idea of that sometimes the adults in the room are the ones that have the most fears, but that actually kids are pretty fearless when they come and intersect with topics or stories that might feel scary. Could you, if you are willing, take a second and think about, in the context where you either make work or work and live, what do you think is something that feels a little bit taboo for young people to watch or participate in, but that you think in this moment, the fearless choice would be to move into that space? So what do you wish that that there was work being created for, the fearless kind of work that feels a little bit of a taboo in your community right now? And if you can drop that in the chat, I'd love to hear, just from where you are, what does it feel like? And then for Christine and Nambi, you both are currently working on shows that have some fearless aspects, where you were working inside of topics or ways of telling stories that you guys had to take a little bit of a leap. And could you share just a little bit about some of the current things you're working on and sort of where it felt, where the fearless part is? Where did you go that felt like maybe it was a bit taboo to begin with? Nambi, would you start?
Happy to share. It actually, it's a very interesting question because I just got an email just when we started from the booking agent for my show, that my show is called Jabari Dreams of Freedom. And it's about a young boy on the south side of Chicago, because I'm from Chicago, south side. And he's afraid to leave the house because he has had an encounter with the police that has scared him. And he doesn't want to go to school. And so the play is about his journey to becoming fearless, to actually inspire. So he goes back in time. His father becomes Barack Obama. He goes back in time and he meets other children who are faced with similar challenges throughout history. And he gets the lesson. And then he meets a 7-year-old Barack Obama on the eve of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And it becomes Jabari's job to infuse in a young Obama how he can be fearless, regardless of what happens in his world. And then, of course, Barack goes on to be president because Jabari did his job. And then he goes back to his community and he becomes an activist. So that's the play that was a in-person show that we have just converted into a digital space. And we just got an email from the booking agent that a venue has decided not to book the show because of the themes of police and that and how young people deal with it. And the adults are clear, like this is what was relayed to me. The adults are super clear that this conversation absolutely needs to happen because children are walking with fear. I was raised in that same space. I walked with fear as a young person, afraid of police. But we weren't talking about it when I was a kid. So the play doesn't even, it's just the setup. It's not the story, right? But they don't want to book the show. They said they can't book the show because they're afraid of the themes of the play. But being very clear that their community desperately needs this conversation. And so my counter to them, I mean, it's probably already a done deal, but I'm going to circle back and be like, hey, can we do some extra programming? Can I do a Zoom? Can my partner do a Zoom with can we do something for the teachers? Like, is there a way to help assuage the fear that, because it is scary, right? And because if you're not prepared to have that conversation as a community, as a parent, Of course you don't want to expose your child to it, because then they're having a conversation without you. It's just really confusing. But I feel like that, I mean, it needs to be said, because it's not like it's not happening. You know, it's not like we have been cooped up in our homes for the past year and watching a Black man be murdered for running in the street, or be murdered for getting out of his car, or, you know, like that's what's real. So our children are walking with that, and how dare we not talk about it? So yeah, I appreciate the question, because I've been figuring out, I'm just sitting here like, after I get off this call, how am I gonna resolve this? How am I gonna address this? Because I mean, they have absolutely every right to deal with that the way they feel is appropriate for their audience. It just, I just wish that I could get on a plane and go in the room and be like, hey, y'all, let's powwow. Let's talk about it. Forgive my use of powwow if that's offensive. I don't mean to be offensive. I just mean, let's get together and let's talk. Let's talk. Anyway.
Thank you, Nambi. Yeah, the duality of our young people absolutely need to be having these conversations, but I, as an adult, am concerned about the sort of reactions around having these conversations. Is one, you know, I work in a presenting space, so this is one that we talk about a lot. How do you bring in art that is going to meet young people in the lives they are living right now, which Christine talked about as well, while simultaneously acknowledging these relationships that you have within your community? How do you caretake both of those? How do you make decisions toward both of those? Or are there times that you need to make decisions to one? And in that moment, are we making decisions toward the young people, or are we making decisions toward, you know, status quo in our community? Which I think is an interesting question for people who work inside of the Theater for Young Audiences world to think about. Christine, it's funny, two of us, the only two, put in mental health over in sort of like what we thought was a little taboo that would be really beneficial for kids to talk about. And I know that the show that you've been working on and that you are currently touring sort of comes into this space of dealing with grief and those things. Can you talk a little bit about how did you decide to make the show? And as you're touring, and of course the North Americans in this conversation are like tears as we dream of being in spaces with our audiences again. But can you talk about what has that been like to tour? What have the reactions been from the young people, and have they been different from the adults?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Nambi for very good things that she said, very wise things. The show I'm touring with now is a monologue, which is called The Belly Beast, or Monster I Magen, for those who speak Norwegian. It's a story of a girl who has lost her mother, and how she deals with this, and how it appeared a monster in her belly when her mom died, and now she's tired of this monster, because this monster are making her doing all the stuff she don't want to and acting in a way she don't want to. So now it's the exorcism day. It's the day where the monster is going to get out. So she's making a lot of traps and a lot of like things in the room to get this monster out. And it's about sorrow and grief, and how it's no facet, and it's no kind of answer. It's no correct answer to how you deal with grief. It's everyone has their own, and grief kind of explodes and comes in waves in different forms and in through different emotions. And it has been the audience, the adult and the children are reacting very different. This is a monologue which the adults thinks is very emotional towards kind of sad, or it awakens those kind of feelings, but the kids are very much more pragmatic and kind of she has to get help to get this monster out because it's bothering her. So it's very much much more. They accept it much more through humor and the kind of practic frames through it, and they also accepts very much the duality that exists in this girl, that she's fun and suddenly sad and suddenly fun again, and all this, and this is kind of the dramaturgy in the story. It's kind of a bit unlogical because it's really like ging, 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 ging. So and I think that's the fun of playing it, because it's not like the traditional, it's more kind of naughty, not naughty, but you see, like you have this Norwegian word rampete, which means like you're a bit you're a bit not mean, but yeah, you're not doing it the way it's expected. So this is Monster in Magen, the Belly Beast, and I'm also touring with a play that is called Tobias, which is actually the thing I'm playing now, that's about gender and transgender. So it's both themes that are met as taboo by different adults. Yeah.
Thank you. Explicitly, I want to make sure that if people have conversations that they would like to be having in this room, to please drop that in the chat. But also, Nambi and Christine, I also sort of promised last time we talked that if you had specific questions for each other, that we would also make space for that. So if at any point you have a question that you would love to ask of your paired artist, please join in.
I do actually.
Yeah.
Shall I just drop it now?
Just drop it. In fact, say it.
Because I think it's so, as I said, I would really like to read Nambi's work. It's so interesting and fascinating. And I just love the way you say, how dare we not talk about it? I think it's just spot on. But I would like to hear more about how you work with young audience. You asked me some of these questions last time, but I would like to ask you the same. How do you work? How do you choose your themes? How do you involve them, or how do you involve them? That would be interesting to know more about.
Sure. In an ideal space, it's really important, like your development process, to have audience feedback. And so even right now with the Jabari play, we've set up an email address for the lead character. And so some students have been emailing Jabari, and Jabari responds. And so that's been really fun, but also to hear what they're getting from the show. We also, in a pandemic space, that's how we've been dealing with it. But I wish I had thought of that years ago. The character should just have an email address. He's got an email address and a YouTube channel, like a real YouTube channel that people can go visit. So one of the brilliant pieces of being part of LabWorks, this is my second time being a part of LabWorks, and this time is very specifically geared towards artists of color, is that we get access to audiences to develop our work. So that part of it is very imperative, and it's actually why I wound up, why I decided to apply for a LabWorks residency my first time around, is because I had a production of Jabari Dreams of Freedom in Chicago. It was commissioned actually by Chicago Children's Theater in 2015 or 16. Because this issue is ongoing for us. It's not new, right? So there's that. But I applied for the residency because of all of the perks of you get access and rehearsal space, and I really wanted to revisit the play because I had spent time in Chicago in developing the play and watching it with audiences and being very clear where I missed the mark. And so really wanted time and space and resources to sort of reinvestigate, how do I have this conversation with young people And it was born out of, you know, conversations with my nephew, honestly, in the wake of the death of Trayvon Martin, murder of Trayvon Martin in 2012, that my family was, you know, we were all given the talk, which is, you know, you sit a young Black person down, you say, hey, this is what happens when the police will pull you over, and this is what you do. This is what you say. This is how you behave. We've all gotten that conversation. But my brother, it skipped a generation. Like he was like, I'm not giving that to my kids because I don't want to scare them. And then all of a sudden this young boy was murdered. And my nephew at the time was about 10. And it's like, well, you have to talk about it because it's the news. It's what's in his world. You have to discuss it. And so the play was actually born out of a need for that, out of me listening to the conversation in my family and seeing that my nephew did not have, he didn't have access to adults he knew and trusted, that to have the honest conversation about what he should do as a young Black boy walking through the streets of Chicago. And how can you not do that? So he had to talk. And so that's where the play came from. And so, you know, but bringing him to the show, bringing my niece to the show, who's younger than him, getting their feedback also because, you know, now I'm their cool auntie. I got to play up. Oh, you can meet the actors. Ooh, you know? And so also hearing from them because they're incredibly astute, brilliant young people. So I talk to I love to watch my audiences and, you know, and also in an ideal space, in a non-pandemia space, like really like doing a workshop around the themes of the play, to just sort of figure out, because I used to primarily make a living as a teaching artist for many, many decades, actually. I know I don't look that old, but yes, I used to really, really be like in the schools and with kids more so. My partner still is now. And so now he's sort of my eyes and ears on the ground. And so like, I'll write something and he'll say, well, actually the kids in the Bronx say it this way. It's like, oh, cool. Boom. Now it's in the script. So it just, you know, it's a multifaceted convo that has shifted because of the pandemic. Because even like now, it's like, thank God we have this email address set up. So we actually, you know, because now they're just getting it through Vimeo. They're getting a Vimeo link and we're not watching the kids watch the show. So we don't know what works. We don't know what's funny. We don't know what's landing. So these emails are so pivotal. And it's like, oh, okay, they're getting it. Like that's the brilliance of like this new thing we decided. It was like, oh, our audiences are not only, they're getting the lessons and they're walking away with what we want them to walk away with. So however that ends up, you know, transmuting itself in their lives, I've done my job. I've given them what I came to give them because they're getting it. I was like floored reading these emails. I was like, oh, you know, so thank you for the question. I appreciate it. And I was deeply inspired by like what we talked about that one day when you talked about how you continue to hone as well. I was like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy that after you build a show that you can continue to rebuild it and refine it as your audiences shift and grow and change. It's important to listen. And so I appreciate that we share that.
Thank you both. Lisa, I see you've got a question and then Guillermo can come after you. Lisa, what do you want to know more about?
Yeah, I was just curious with like, I was really interested in the pairings that the moderators put together. And of course, you guys are both working with, you know, young audience, which is there's universality to that. But you're also from very different countries who, you know, value arts and culture very differently. So I was just curious, like in your conversations that you had before this, like where you found, you know, you overlapped and where you found that you didn't overlap, just based on where you're coming from.
Oh, you go.
I'm going to go. Nambi, why don't you start?
Sure. I was just going to say, just one of the things that struck me in listening to Christine introduce me was, you know, she pointed these out as differences. She says she grew up across from projects. I grew up in mountains, but to me, the projects were mountains, right? And so to me, like these looming tall buildings, I mean, it wasn't a natural space, but that was something that we shared, that we learned to locate ourselves and our artistry in the in-between spaces of those mountains. And so I just thought that was so profound that she saw it as difference, because I was like, no, that's kind of the same thing, except in an urban environment. And then the other thing I thought was really interesting was, I think of Chicago as a small town. Right? Because, you know, once you're a working artist in a city, you really can't go anywhere. You can't go anywhere. I will literally get off a plane and be on the subway going home, and oh God, there's somebody I know. Can I just get off a plane and go home? You know? So it's just like, so I think of Chicago very much as like a small town. But the thing that was interesting was how she said, well, it's got a lot of people, and I'm like from a really small town. And so like, it kind of challenged my notion of my own community and that I come from, and how I think about it. I was like, I guess it is a big city, but it didn't feel like it to me. And so just the things that I love that we shared that really inspired me was how we both loved as children to play dress up and make dolls and take stories. Like, to me, like that was, I was like, oh, like just thinking about a little Christine on the other side of the world and me on the south side of Chicago, hiding out under a table with a blanket over it, and, you know, and taking my dolls and making stories. And she had a box, and I love that. Like, that just made my heart feel so warm, you know, that we share that, the commonality of that.
Christine, what came to mind for you?
Well, I agree on. I think it's beautiful the things you say, Nambi, and also I'm not sure if I kind of interpret different things in your story, Nambi, that, so maybe it's not true, but I get the feeling that it's not obvious for any of us to have chosen this path, to have chosen to work with art. And I also think this is a kind of a beautiful kind of link. But we haven't talked about the different kind of framework. In Norway, we have a lot of the state has a lot of brings a lot of money into art and respect it. And we have, the reason I can tour now is because we have this this school program where professional arts go into the school, and it's seen as a part of the school day. So therefore we can travel now, even though it's a pandemic going on. So we have this these things is very helpful, and of course it's very good. And we didn't talk about these things, how it's been for you in Chicago and how the framework is like that. But I think that putting myself outside the capital, being out in the countryside producing art, I think this kind of I know that this you don't have the same resources, because you kind of move away from the resources because people don't see your art, so they don't grant money to you because they don't see what you do. And in this part, that maybe I have done it a bit difficult for myself, if you see what I mean. So yeah. I don't know. And I see that Gate is saying 5 minutes, so I don't know.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say that I just realized now, looking at us, I just realized that you, Nambi, probably don't know about this great touring system in Norway, because the rest of us actually do. So I will forward some info about that. But to end on a good note, I think it's always nice to listen to you, Christine, when you talk about previous audience that have commented on your work. And it's always nice to listen to one teacher in this fantastic touring system we have in Norway, and also what one audience, what the pupils, what's the latest news from them in your touring. I think that's, I would really like to listen to that.
We have about 2 minutes left, so I think you might be able to share a quick response. And Nambi, I had the same question actually about what is an email standing out from a young person that came to Jabari. So I have that. I was like, oh, I want to know what those emails say. Christine, did you have a short you can share?
Just today, a teacher said that 5 years ago they had a trans person in their class. So this now I'm traveling with Tobias, which is the gender performance. She was very moved and very touched, and it was like, finally, it's someone telling their story. So that's a short.
Thank you. Nambi, do you have a 30-second remembrance from one of these emails?
Just that they got the young man, his name was Lennon, like John Lennon, that's how his name was spelled. And he said that he understood that the play was trying to teach him how to take from the past and put it into today and be fearless going forward.
I feel like fearless has come up multiple times in this conversation. I want to thank both Nambi and Christine for sharing their work fearlessly as well. As we go back into as we welcome back, actually, we're in the large room.
We're in the
as
large
we welcome back everyone who is going to rejoin us. I will tell you that the way that we're going to partly share back is for Nambi and Christine to choose one of the following, either a question that this conversation continues to hold for you, or an insight that this conversation unlocked for you. So you might want to think about that as we welcome everyone back. Hi, everybody. Nice to see everyone joining us again. Was it hard for you all to stop your conversations? We could have kept going a while. So yep, Boomer.
Especially if there is a bar to go to afterwards to sit and continue some of these conversations with a beer perhaps, or some food.
I know that is the definite downside of a Zoom panel, is that there is no sort of liminal space as you leave and bring the conversation forward. So I guess we'd have to invite all of you to create your own casual conversation and relationship building as we move toward closing this conversation out. We thought we don't want a report from each breakout room. That felt impossible and too long. But we thought we would ask each of the artists, both the North American and the Norwegian artists, a couple of questions to sort of help give a little bit of insight into where the conversations went in each of these breakout rooms. And the first part of this is a choice. You can either answer an insight from the conversation that you left with, or a new or lasting question that the conversation brought up for you. And I think that the only, any artist can start, but we might keep the pairs responses together so that some of the storytelling makes a little bit of sense. Is there any artist that would like to start? Either an insight? Yeah, Christine.
Yeah. Can I do both if I'm short?
If you're short.
Okay. The insight, I think it was Nambi who said, how dare we not to talk about it? And this is something I will bring with me. How dare we not to talk about it? And the question to myself is, how can I keep on being fearless in these times? And where do I find courage to tell the stories that need to be told in this special time?
Thank you. Nambi, do you want to, as the other artists in that conversation, would you be willing to share an insight and or a question?
My insight was really more in the story that Christine told about the show Tobias, about that she did the show, and then it turned out that there was it's about a transgender, and that you were telling the story of someone in the class, and I don't know, that just really hit me. how powerful that is, like for that young person and that community to see that story reflected, because that would not have happened 2 years ago, you know? And so that you're making that work is just really impactful to me, and also dealing with grief. Like if I had had a manual for how to deal with grief or creative outlet, I'd be a better person, I'm sure. So just thank you for your work and your artistry and like really telling stories that matter. It's just wonderful. It's just really wonderful. And the question that I was left with was, how can we get more money in the States like y'all got in Norway? Come on now.
The essential North American question.
How can we get some of that?
So if those insights and questions sparked something for you, you can come back and watch the recording of the conversation we had in our breakout room. One of the other breakout rooms, is there an artist who would be willing to share an insight or question that came out of that room for them?
Sure, I can do it. You here? Yeah, I actually had a little insight during the conversation about something I said myself. No, in the meeting with Santee, I realized how on the question of authenticity and representing something you are a representative of, and I realized myself I'm very far from being authentic in anything I do. So that was kind of a bit of a self-insight. Thank you, Santee, for that. I will think about that tonight.
Thank you. Santee, would you be willing to share your reflection?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, you know, no matter what people's process is, and Yo and I have a different process, but it's really we're communicators and reaching out to people. So it's always inspiring for me to think that the work that we do is impactful, and then the work that we do for young audiences is really important, and in maintaining creativity and you know, sharing story. And I think that's one of the reasons why we do what we do, is just to continue to share stories.
Thank you. Anne or Catherine?
Yeah, I would say that my curiosity has been triggered quite a lot during the conversations, not only today, but with Catherine for the past 2 weeks. And I look forward to actually be able to be invited into some of the work that Catherine and Blindspot Collective is doing, and also being struck by the challenges that you pose to the audience whenever you're creating, and the importance of the communication within the work that you're doing, and that it's really powerful what I've seen so far, and I really look forward to see more of it. So curiosity is maybe a word that I've left with now. So thank you so much. It's been really, really interesting.
Catherine?
Yeah. And I guess there's a question on my mind, and I think that relates to this work and relates to this moment. It's just that I think that we're in a moment of being in the unknown, and we don't know what's to come. And we don't know even beyond that if there will be sort of a new challenge, a different challenge, an unimaginable challenge like this one. And so the question, that I have is like, and I think this connects to authenticity. How can we stay limber and responsive? How can we think outside the box? How can we collaborate? Can Anne and I now collaborate, together? How can dance and theater and bring in music and so on? We have to stay agile if we really want to be responsive to what's happening in the current moment, because the world is so unexpected. So that's the question and the insight, I think, together for me.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Boomer for our last sort of closing question, because he said this in our planning meeting, and both Dayna and I had huge grins and said, well, that's clearly the end. So Boomer, can I invite you to help us close out this conversation?
Sure, thank you. And Catherine and Anne, actually, both of what you said is a perfect segue to this question. So if we look at the process so far and consider it maybe being the first date of you coming together and meeting each other, what might a second date look like? So if you were to consider collaboration or continuing to talk, what would that look like for you? And so this is for all of the artists. Anyone want to volunteer to go first?
I can start because I think
Yeah,
Anne
thank
and
you.
I have something really concrete, hopefully, is that she is going to join me, hopefully in a week, actually March 8th, for a virtual show of Safa Story. And so she'll be able to see the experience of the interactive virtual process that we're doing. So that's one second date that we have.
That's awesome. Thank you. That's incredible. Do you want to add anything to that, Anne, or you're good with that part?
Yeah, I just look forward to the second date, basically.
Nice, thank you. Anyone from our other pairs? Yeah. Oh, sorry, Nambi?
I want to see Belly Beast. That's the name of the show. I want to see that. We just suffered a loss in our family about a month ago. And I just want to see it. I want to see it. I want to experience it. Because it'll probably be a source of healing. So I still want to, I want to engage in your art as you're creating it, Christine. And then we'll have a third date.
That would be lovely. I can send it to you. It's in Norwegian, but that would be lovely. And I would really like to read Jabari's Dream of Freedom, and also see this because it's not the same that you have the digital tour with. That's something different, right?
It's sort of, I redesigned the play based on a YouTube channel. I'll absolutely send you the link. I'll send it to you today.
It would be lovely, and read your work, and maybe also doing this workshop themes together with Chicago young Chicago audience and young North Norwegian audience. That would be really fun.
And Santee, sorry, you were ready to jump in there too.
Well, my ideal second date would be to have conversations in the lands. I would like to be in Norway. I would like to be in the fjords and the mountains, and I would like to see the towns, because of all of the work that I do is land-based, and Yo and I talked about where we come from, and kind of our family connections. So I mean, that's in the ideal world, but other than that, I mean, maybe another conversation, because we just started our conversations, and maybe we can be in the land somewhere where it's possible to have Wi-Fi, so we get to see where we're actually located. Because I turned my screen around and said, look outside. You could show them my land and back.
Beautiful, thank you. And Yo?
Yeah, I agree completely. Cutting down a tree or chopping some wood, or that's the way to bond too, not necessarily in the artistic room in the theater. Yes. Thanks.
Beautiful. Well, thank you all so much, and thank you, Geir and Christine, for this opportunity. It's I've learned so much through the process and through the conversations as well.
No, I thank you.
I think we're turning to you now, right, Christina?
Yes, sadly, it's up. I enjoyed this so much. It's been truly meaningful. So I just want to extend our warmest thanks to you, Lindsey, Dayna, and Boomer, for providing these 90 minutes of such insightful and engaged conversations. And thank you to the artists so much for sharing information on their work and their perspective in these really strange and challenging times. And to all of you, it was great to see that so many of you logged on to spend time with us. Please check out the information about the artist that has been posted in the chat. And this, you can find a full recording of this webinar and also the other previous seminars on our website and YouTube page. So thank you so much for taking part in this, and take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.